The taxi pulled up to the curb, and I sat there for a moment just staring at the house. It looked the same as it always had, the red brick, the large oak tree in the front yard, the slightly crooked mailbox. But everything felt different because my father wasn't inside anymore. I had been gone for 6 months on a work placement in London, archiving rare manuscripts. I had missed the funeral. That guilt sat heavy in my chest, a cold weight that wouldn't go away. I paid the driver and dragged my suitcase up the path. The house was quiet, too quiet. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the hallway. The air smelled like lavender air freshener, not the old wood and coffee scent I remembered. I didn't call out. I didn't want to speak to Delia, my stepmother, or Maylie, her daughter. Not yet. I just wanted to go to my room and breathe. I climbed the stairs, the wood creaking under my feet. My room was exactly as I left it, or so I thought. I dropped my bag and went straight to the dresser. The velvet jewelry box, my late mother's box, was sitting there. It was the only real piece of her I had left. I reached out, expecting the heavy, reassuring weight of the gold and gemstones inside. But when I lifted it, my heart stopped. It was light as a feather. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the clasp. I threw the lid open. Empty. The black velvet lining stared back at me stark and bare. The diamond brooch that had belonged to my great-grandmother, gone. The string of pearls my mother wore on her wedding day, gone. The sapphire ring I used to try on when I was a little girl, gone. Every single piece of my history had vanished. Panic rose in my throat, hot and sour. I turned the box upside down, shaking it, hoping maybe something was stuck in the lining. Nothing. I didn't bother unpacking. I stormed out of the room and thundered down the stairs. I found Delia in the living room. She was sitting on the plush white sofa, a glass of white wine in her hand, scrolling through her phone. She looked comfortable, too comfortable. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Delia took a slow sip of her wine before glancing at me. She looked bored. "Hello to you too, Larkin. Nice to see you made it back." "The jewelry," I snapped. "Mom's jewelry box is empty. Where is it?" She sighed, a long, dramatic exhale. "Oh, that old junk? I cleared out the clutter while you were gone. It was depressing having all that old stuff lying around." I stared at her, unable to process the words. Clutter? That was my inheritance. That was my mother. Delia waved her hand dismissively. "You weren't here, Larkin. The house needed breathing room. I donated most of it to a charity shop downtown. You know, for people who actually need things." "You donated a diamond brooch to a thrift store," I screamed. "Do you think I'm stupid?" "Lower your voice," she hissed. "I gifted some of the smaller pieces to family, cousins who would appreciate them. Stop being so materialistic. Your father left everything to me. Technically, that jewelry was part of the estate. Be grateful I let you keep your old room at all." Just then, the front door opened. Maylie walked in, dropping her backpack on the floor. She looked at me, surprised, then smirked. "Oh, you're back." I looked at her hand as she brushed hair out of her face. There on her pinky finger was the sapphire ring, my mother's ring. It had been resized, the gold band cut down to fit her fleshy finger. The sight of it made me sick. "You donated it," I whispered, pointing at Maylie's hand. Delia didn't flinch. "Maylie liked it. It's better than it gathering dust." I took a step forward, my hands clenched into fists. I wanted to scream to tear the ring off Maylie's finger, but I stopped. Screaming wouldn't get the jewelry back. I needed a plan. I retreated to my room, slamming the door. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. They thought they had won. They thought I was just the quiet, sentimental archivist who would cry and eventually get over it. They were wrong. I wiped my face and forced myself to breathe. If I wanted to beat Delia, I had to be smart. I had to be cold. I waited until the house was quiet that night. Then I crept up to the attic. Delia hated the attic. She said it smelled like dead mice and refused to go up there. It was my sanctuary now. I dug through the stacks of boxes labeled Harlan's office. I wasn't just looking for memories. I was looking for paper. As an archivist, I knew the power of a paper trail. I spent 4 hours shifting through dust and old tax returns. Finally, I found it. A blue folder tucked inside a box of old yearbooks. It contained the original insurance appraisals for the jewelry, dated 20 years ago. And stapled to the back was a codicil to my mother's old will, one that predated Delia. It explicitly listed the jewelry as my sole property upon turning 25. But as I moved a stack of old ledgers, I saw a metal lockbox in the corner. I knew the combination, my birthday. I opened it. Inside wasn't money. It was a deed transfer document. I began to read, and my eyes went wide. I sat in a corner booth at the diner downtown, the plastic seat sticking to my legs. Thayer slid into the seat across from me 10 minutes later. Thayer was my childhood best friend, but more importantly, he was a ruthless property attorney. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Larkin," he said, ordering a black coffee. "I found something," I said, sliding the deed across the table. "I need you to tell me if this means what I think it means." Thayer put on his glasses and read the document. He went silent for a long time. He flipped the page, read the fine print, and then looked up at me. A slow smile spread across his face. "Your dad never told her, did he?" Thayer asked. "I don't think so," I replied. "She keeps saying Dad left her everything." "He left her his assets," Thayer corrected. "But this house wasn't his to leave." He tapped the paper. "The house belonged to your mother solely. When she died, it went into a trust for you. Your dad had a life estate. That means he had the legal right to live there until he died. But now that Harlan is gone." "The life estate is extinguished," I finished. "Exactly. Delia doesn't own the house, Larkin. You do. She's trespassing." I felt a rush of adrenaline. "I can kick her out." "You can," Thayer said, "but she stole your jewelry. If you kick her out now, she disappears with the money she made from it. Don't tell her yet. Let's see how deep of a hole she digs." I walked back into the house with a neutral expression. It took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to laugh when I saw Delia. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of her. She looked up with a smug grin that made my skin crawl. "Larkin," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "we need to talk." She slid a letter across the smooth granite countertop. It was an informal notice to vacate, typed up on her computer. It looked ridiculous, but the intent was clear. "I'm planning to sell the house," Delia announced. "The market is scorching hot right now. I've already spoken to a few investors. You have 30 days to find a new place. I'm sure you can find a small apartment with your limited income." I picked up the paper. I read it slowly, letting the silence stretch out. She expected me to cry. She expected me to beg. She wanted a fight so she could play the victim. Instead, I looked her dead in the eye and shrugged. "Okay." Delia blinked, her smile faltering for a second. "Okay." "Yes," I said calmly. "It's your house, right? If you want to sell, you can sell. I'll start packing my things." I turned and walked away before she could see the triumph in my eyes. She had just handed me the shovel, and I was going to let her dig her own grave. Since Delia believed I was leaving without a fight, she went into overdrive. She was convinced she was about to make a fortune on the sale, so she decided to maximize her profit. She hired a team of contractors the very next day to spruce up the place. I sat on the porch and watched as a van full of painters arrived. Delia was barking orders at them, pointing at the shutters and the trim. She was spending money like water. I knew for a fact that my father hadn't left much cash, just the house and a small savings account. If she was paying for this, she was using her own savings. Or worse, the money from my mother's jewelry. "Beige," I heard her tell the head painter. "Paint the living room beige. Buyers love neutral tones." I watched them cover up the soft, warm yellow walls my mother had painted by hand years ago. It hurt to watch, but I bit my tongue. Every time Delia swiped her credit card for a new roof, or new landscaping, or fresh paint, she was increasing the value of my property. She was investing thousands of dollars into a house she didn't own. "It looks much better, doesn't it?" she asked me later, gesturing to the sterile, boring walls. "It looks expensive," I said. "You have to spend money to make money, Larkin," she lectured. "But I wouldn't expect you to understand real estate." While Delia was busy playing, "Flip this house," I was busy playing detective. I took the appraisal documents and the photos of the jewelry to every pawn shop in a 50-mile radius. It was exhausting work. I spent days walking into dingy shops that smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation, showing the photos to skeptical clerks. On the third day, I hit gold. I walked into a shop on the edge of town, a place with bars on the windows. I showed the clerk the photo of the diamond brooch. "Yeah, I remember that," the guy said, chewing on a toothpick. "Came in about 3 weeks ago. Woman was flashy, talked a lot. Said it was her dead aunts and she wanted to get rid of bad memories." My stomach turned. "Do you still have it?" "It's on the shelf," he said. He pulled it out of the display case. Seeing it there, surrounded by cheap watches and old guitars, broke my heart. I showed him the police report I had filed the day before. "This is stolen property." The clerk sighed. "Look, lady, I bought it legal, but if it's hot, I have to put a hold on it." "Put a hold on it," I said. "And tell me, did she sell anything else?" "Not here," he said, "but she mentioned checking out the shop over in Westside." I had the trail. I told the police not to arrest her yet. I needed to find everything first. Maylee was not as clever as her mother. She was spoiled, vain, and addicted to social media. That was her downfall. I monitored her accounts like a hawk. Since I wasn't fighting them on the house sale, Maylee had let her guard down. She thought I was defeated. One morning, while I was drinking coffee, I saw it. Maylee had posted a selfie on Instagram. She was at a brunch spot with her friends holding a mimosa. Around her neck was the string of pearls, my mother's pearls. The caption read, "Vintage vibes, spoiled brunch." I took a screenshot immediately. Then I saved it to 3 different folders. I walked into the kitchen where Maylee was eating cereal. "That necklace you were wearing in your photo," I said casually. "It looks expensive." Maylee froze for a second, then shrugged. "Oh, that? My boyfriend bought it for me. It's just costume jewelry, not real pearls." Delia walked in, catching the end of the conversation. "Stop coveting your sister's things, Larkin," she snapped. "Jealousy is ugly. You should focus on finding an apartment instead of worrying about Maylee's jewelry." "You're right," I said, forcing a smile. "Truth is beautiful." They had no idea that I was compiling a dossier of evidence that would destroy them. The next week, Delia brought in the realtor. His name was Coulter, and he was exactly the kind of person Delia would hire. He wore a shiny suit that was too tight, and he smelled like aggressive cologne. He walked through the house like he already owned it, tapping on walls and making notes on his tablet. "Great bones," Coulter said. "With the new paint and the roof repairs, we can list this high, very high." He walked into the garage, where I had been storing the few boxes I had packed. He wrinkled his nose. "This needs to go," he told Delia, pointing at my stuff. "We need to stage the garage. Buyers need to envision their luxury cars here, not cardboard boxes." Delia turned to me. "You heard him, Larkin. Clear this junk out. Put it in a storage unit." "Sorry about my stepdaughter," Delia apologized to Coulter. "She's a bit of a squatter. We're having a hard time getting her to launch." Coulter looked at me with pity. "It's tough out there," he said condescendingly, "but you can't hold up the sale." I looked at the two of them, the greedy stepmother and the slimy realtor. "Don't worry," I whispered to myself as they walked away. "Let them list it." The market was indeed hot, just as Delia had predicted. Within 3 days of the listing going live, offers started coming in. Delia was in a frenzy of excitement. She sat at the dining table, calculator in hand, adding up numbers. "This is it, Maylee," she squealed. "We're going to be rich." One offer came in quickly. It was an all-cash offer, but it was slightly below the asking price. A sensible seller would have taken it, but Delia wasn't sensible. She was greedy. "Reject it," she told Coulter on the phone. "I want more. I know what this house is worth." She hung up and looked at me. I was in the kitchen making tea. "Once this sells," she said, "I'm moving to a condo in Florida, a gated community with a pool. Maylee is coming with me. You're on your own, Larkin. I hope you found a place." "I'm looking," I said. "But Delia, what about the jewelry money? Didn't that give you a cushion? Why are you so desperate for the house cash?" Delia turned pale. She looked away quickly. That went too. Bills. Outstanding debts your father left. You have no idea how expensive it is to run a household. I knew she was lying. She had blown the jewelry money on the renovations. She was cash poor and banking everything on the sale. I called Thayer that night. She rejected the first offer, I said. She's getting greedy. Perfect, Thayer replied. It's time to deploy the trap. Thayer had set up a limited liability company, LLC, to act as a buyer. He was the manager, so my name appeared nowhere on the paperwork. This was crucial. If Delia saw my name, the game would be over. We needed her to go all the way to the closing table. The next day, Coulter called Delia with news. We got a big one, he said. I could hear his voice through the speakerphone. An investment group. They're offering $10,000 over asking price. Cash. Delia shrieked with joy. She did a little dance in the kitchen. There's a catch, though, Coulter said. They want a quick close, 2 weeks. Can you be ready? Yes, Delia shouted. We can pack this week, sell it. She hung up and turned to Maylee. Start packing the expensive furniture, baby. We are going to Florida. She didn't even look at me. I was just a ghost in the background, but the ghost was the one pulling the strings. Delia decided that she didn't want to pay movers to take old junk to Florida. She only wanted the new things, so she hosted a garage sale to clear out the house. This included my father's things, his tools, his collection of history books, and his fishing gear. I stood by the window and watched strangers picking through my dad's life. I saw a man haggling over my father's favorite fishing rod, the one he used to take me to the lake with. $5, the man said. Fine, take it, Delia said, waving him off. It took everything I had not to run out there and scream. It felt like she was selling pieces of his soul for pocket change, but I couldn't blow my cover. Not yet. I texted my friends, Mark and Julie. She's selling Dad's stuff. Please come buy it. I'll pay you back double. Within an hour, Mark and Julie arrived. They pretended to be random shoppers. They bought the fishing gear, the books, and the old tool chest. They loaded it into their trucks while Delia counted the cash, smug and oblivious. She thought she was clearing out trash. She was actually helping me save the things that mattered without me having to say a word. 2 days before the closing, the house was full of boxes. The air was thick with anticipation. Delia opened a bottle of expensive champagne she had bought, probably on credit. She poured 2 glasses, one for her and one for Maylee. To us, she toasted, and to getting what we deserve. I walked into the room to get a glass of water. Delia looked at me, her eyes glassy with alcohol. You know, Larkin, she began, her voice slurred. I put up with your father's snoring and his moody daughter for 10 years. I earned this payout. I took care of him. I gripped my glass tight. You hired a nurse to take care of him, Delia. You spent most of the time at the country club. I managed the estate, she snapped. I was the wife, and now I'm the owner, so you can take your sour attitude and get out of my house. So you feel you're owed this house? I asked quietly. Delia laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Honey, I don't feel it. I own this house. It's mine. The law says so. I just nodded. Enjoy the champagne, Delia. The day before the closing, I got the call I had been waiting for. It was the detective. They had located the rest of the jewelry at a pawn shop in the next town over. The sapphire ring Maylee had worn was there too. She must have pawned it when she realized they were moving, probably to buy clothes. I went to the shop myself. I had to use my entire savings account to redeem the tickets. It cost me nearly $8,000 to buy back my own inheritance. It was painful to hand over that money, knowing Delia had spent the cash she got for them. But as I held the heavy velvet bag in my hands, I felt a wave of relief. I had them. The brooch, the pearls, the ring, they were safe. I sat in my car in the pawn shop parking lot and put the bag in the glove compartment. I locked it. Then I called Thayer. I have the jewelry, I said. Good, Thayer said. Are you ready for tomorrow? I'm ready, I said. Let's finish this. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. Now it was time to snap it shut. The closing was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. at the title company's office. It was a sterile building with glass walls and gray carpet. Delia arrived wearing a new white dress, looking like a bride. Coulter was there, grinning like a shark. Thayer was there, sitting calmly at the head of the table, representing the buyer. I walked in 5 minutes late. Delia's head snapped up. "What is she doing here?" she shrieked. "Get her out. She has no rights to this money." Coulter looked nervous. "Larkin, this is a private meeting. You need to wait outside." I didn't say anything. I just walked over and stood next to Thayer. "Actually," Thayer said, his voice deep and authoritative, "we have a problem with the title search." Delia rolled her eyes. "What problem? The title is clean. My husband left it to me." Thayer opened his briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. He pulled out a single document. Thayer slid the deed across the polished mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Delia. "Delia," Thayer said, "you don't have the authority to sell this property." "Excuse me," Delia laughed nervously. "Of course I do. I'm the executor." "You are the executor of Harlan's estate," Thayer corrected. "But the house was never part of Harlan's estate to begin with. He had a life estate. That right ended the moment he died." Coulter, the realtor, snatched the paper. He scanned it, his eyes widening. His face turned paper white. He looked at Delia with pure horror. "Is this true?" Coulter whispered. "No," Delia yelled. "That's a fake. My husband left me everything. This is some kind of trick." Thayer pointed to the line at the bottom. "It is a recorded deed, Delia. The fee simple owner is Larkin. She has owned the house since her mother died. Your husband was just a guest." The room went silent. I stepped forward and spoke softly. "He left you his assets, Delia, but the house wasn't his. It was my mother's, and now it's mine." Delia went ballistic. Her face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. She stood up and slammed her hands on the table. "You little witch," she screamed at me. "You planned this, you let me think." She reached for the deed, trying to tear it up. Thayer was faster. He snatched it back. "Security," the title officer shouted into the phone. "I spent $30,000 renovating that dump," Delia shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "I put on a new roof. I painted the walls. You owe me that money." I looked at her, my expression completely flat. "I didn't approve those renovations, Delia. I never signed a contract. You did that as a tenant. Actually, tenants aren't allowed to make structural changes without permission. But I'll let it slide. Thanks for the new roof, by the way." Coulter was packing his bag frantically. I'm out. This is fraud. I didn't know." He bolted for the door. Delia slumped into the chair, sobbing. "You can't do this. We have the money spent. We have plans." We returned to the house an hour later. Delia had driven like a maniac, trying to beat me there. She ran inside and tried to slam the door in my face. "I'm not leaving," she yelled through the wood. "Squatters' rights, I live here." I didn't try to force the door. I just took out my phone and dialed the police. I didn't call for an eviction. That takes time. I called to report a theft. When the officers arrived, Delia opened the door, trying to play the victim. "Officer, thank God. My stepdaughter is trying to kick me out of my own home." The officer looked at me. I handed him the file folder. "I'm the legal owner of this property," I said. "But that's a civil matter. I'm calling because this woman stole over $50,000 worth of jewelry from this house and pawned it. Here are the pawn tickets with her signature. Here are the photos of her daughter wearing the stolen items." Delia's face fell. The officer looked at the pawn tickets. He recognized the names of the shops. "Ma'am," the officer said to Delia, "we need to talk about this jewelry. Grand larceny is a serious charge." I bought them back," I interjected. "I have them, but she owes me $8,000 for the pawn fees, and she stole them." The reality set in like a cold front. Delia was standing in the hallway of a house she didn't own, facing a police officer who was reading her rights regarding theft. The Florida condo dream was dead. The cash was gone. She shifted tactics instantly. The anger vanished, replaced by a pathetic, weeping desperation. She turned to me, hands clasped. "Larkin," she cried, "please don't press charges. How can you do this to family? We have nowhere to go. Maylee is your sister." I looked at Maylee. For the first time in her life, she was silent. She looked terrified, clutching her phone like a lifeline. She realized that her rich girl act was over. "Family," I repeated. "You sold my mother's wedding ring to a pawn shop for cash. You threw away my father's fishing gear. You treated me like a stranger in my own home." "I was desperate," Delia pleaded. "We can work this out. I'll pay you back." "You have no money, Delia," I said. "You spent it on my roof." I looked at Maylee again. "You should have thought about family when you were wearing my dead mother's ring on your pinky finger." I handed Delia a legal document Thayer had prepared. It was an eviction notice. "Since there was never a lease and you never paid rent, you are technically tenants at sufferance," I explained, using the words Thayer had taught me. "I am giving you 30 days to vacate. That is the legal requirement." Delia stared at the paper, her hands shaking. 30 days, she whispered, "but where will we go?" "That's not my problem," I said. "But let me be clear. If you damage 1 inch of this house, if you scratch a floor or take a light fixture or strip the copper wire, I will press criminal charges for the theft of the jewelry. If you leave peacefully and the house is intact, I might let the theft charges go." I hired a private security guard to sit in the driveway for the next month. I wasn't taking any chances. I let them take their clothes and their personal furniture. But anything that belonged to the house, the appliances, the curtains, the tools, stayed. Maylee didn't go quietly. A few days later, my friend Julie sent me a link. Maylee had started a GoFundMe page. The title was, "Kicked Out Onto the Streets by Wicked Stepsister. Help Us Survive." She wrote a sob story about how I had manipulated the will and thrown them out into the cold immediately after our father died. She left out the part about the house belonging to my mother and the part about the stolen jewelry. I didn't get angry. I just responded with facts. I posted a single update in the comments section. I uploaded the police report regarding the stolen jewelry, the photos of Maylee wearing the stolen ring, and the deed showing the house was never theirs. The internet did the rest. Within hours, the comments turned on Maylee. "You stole from a dead woman." "Wait, the stepmom pawned the heirlooms." "Scammers." Maylee was shamed into deleting the campaign and her entire Instagram account within 24 hours. The 30 days passed slowly, but finally the deadline arrived. I pulled up to the house. A U-Haul truck was parked in the driveway. Delia was carrying a box of clothes out to the truck. She looked aged. Her hair was messy, and she wasn't wearing makeup. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a bitter defeat. I stood on the porch and watched them load the last of their things. Maylee wouldn't even look at me. She climbed into the passenger seat of the truck and slammed the door. Delia paused at the bottom of the steps. She looked back at the house she had renovated for me. "You'll never be happy here," she spat, trying for one last dig. "It's too big for one person. You'll be all alone in this big, empty house." I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just peace. "I'm not alone," I replied. "I have my memories, I have my mother's jewelry, and I have the piece you tried to sell." Before she could leave, there was one final piece of business. Delia was terrified of the theft charges. She knew that a criminal record would ruin her chances of finding a job or a decent apartment. Thayer met us at the truck. "We have a settlement agreement," he said. To avoid jail time, Delia agreed to sign over my father's car, a vintage sedan she had planned to sell, and the remaining cash in their joint bank account. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover the $8,000 I had spent buying back the jewelry, plus the legal fees. She signed the papers on the hood of the U-Haul. Her hand was shaking. "This leaves me with nothing," she whispered. "You have your freedom," Thayer said. "That's more than you gave Larkin's heirlooms." Delia got into the truck. She had effectively paid $30,000 to renovate my house, lost her nest egg, and lost the car. She drove away with nothing but her clothes and her daughter. I waited until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then, I called the locksmith. He arrived within 20 minutes and changed every lock on the house. When he left, the house was finally quiet. I walked into the living room. The walls were still that hideous beige Delia had chosen. I hated it. It looked like a hotel lobby. I went to the garage and found my dad's old tool chest, the one I had bought back. I found a paint scraper. I walked over to the wall near the fireplace and dug the edge of the scraper into the fresh paint. I peeled back a long strip of the beige latex. Underneath, the soft, warm yellow that my mother had painted revealed itself. It was still there. It had been covered up, but it wasn't gone. I went upstairs to my bedroom. I placed the velvet jewelry box back on the dresser. I opened it. The diamond brooch sparkled. The pearls glowed. The sapphire ring sat in its slot. It was full. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like lavender air freshener anymore. It was starting to smell like home. She thought she was selling my past. She only secured my future.